Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Lake. I will be helping host today's webinar, and thank you for attending today. Today, we have a webinar on the Altium to PADS professional translation process. Hopefully, we will cover, and what you'll learn today is how to translate the Altium schematic and libraries into the PADS professional environment. Okay, so first we'll talk about the schematic and associated schematic libraries, and then we will talk about how to actually bring in the Altium layout designs into PADS Professional as well, and preserve the integrity of your overall design so you'll be able to package, forward annotate, as well as cross-probe between schematic and layout after translating from Altium into PADS Professional. Okay, so again, my name is Kyle Lake. I am an application engineer with Oasis Sales, and this webinar series is held by Oasis Sales and partnered with TriLogic. If you're unfamiliar with Oasis Sales, we have been a premier EDA partner with Mentor Graphics for over 18 years, and we are happy to continue to support Mentor Graphics tools through the Siemens acquisition. So Mentor is now a Siemens company as well. So we are able to support our customers in all different aspects of electronics design, from PCB design to electronics cooling to wire harness, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. So if you're unsure who to contact, if you like what you see today or have any other questions, you'll see down below, those are the states we service. We kind of cover the Midwest and Northwest of the United States. So like I said, we are partnering on this webinar series with TriLogic, and TriLogic is kind of our counterpart on the East Coast and Southeast regions of the United States. And they have been a product design community partner for over 30 years, and they are based in Andover, Massachusetts, and they are able to help with all Mentor Graphics tools, just like Oasis Sales, as well as some other product lifecycle management tools such as Omnify or Arena. Okay, so again, like I said, they're on the East Coast and Southeast regions of the United States. And again, down below, you can see what states that they service. So if you're in either of those territories for Oasis Sales or TriLogic, and you're unsure who to contact for more pricing information, evaluation information, or just technical information in general, you can please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will have my contact information in just a few slides. Okay, just a graphical representation. Again, like I said, Oasis Sales in the Midwest and Northwest region, and TriLogic basically on the entire East Coast and Southeast region of the United States. If you like what you see today, we do host regular webinars, and all of them are recorded and uploaded onto YouTube. So you can find that by searching on YouTube Oasis Sales or TriLogic, or go directly to our website for Oasis Sales or trilogic.com. And we host webinars on a multitude of different products, as well as solutions, and just different ways to do things in the tools. So we're always trying to come out with new content in order to make our customers more successful and more educated. Okay, so just a quick blurb about an upcoming important webinar that Mentor Graphics is hosting. This will be next week, next Wednesday, August 14th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, talking about RF design challenges for PCB. And it's going to be focusing on the PADS professional product line, which we're talking about today. Okay, so again, this is hosted by Mentor Graphics themselves, and it should be a very informative session. Okay, here's my contact information. So again, my name's Kyle Lake. We're going to be having Chris Kleppinger from Mentor Graphics actually presenting today. If you'd like to take a screenshot or maybe jot both of our contact information down, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, if you have confusion on who to contact within your respective region, or just general technical questions as well. So if you are unfamiliar with GoToMeeting, that's what we're using to host today's webinar. You should see a little dialog box for GoToMeeting. And in there, you're able to ask questions that both Chris and I can see and respond to accordingly. Okay, so I do have everyone on mute just to kind of cut down on the extraneous noise, but please feel free to utilize that chat box as necessary. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over the screen control to Chris Kleppinger, and he'll take us through our webinar today of PADS Professional, translating Altium into PADS Professional.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. One moment here. All right. Thank you all for joining. Again, as Kyle said, my name is Chris Kleppinger, and I work for Mentor Graphics directly. My job here, I'm an application engineer focusing on our PCB tools, and I help support all of our North America distributors. So I work very closely with Oasis Sales and Trilogic, as well as our other North America distributors. Okay, so today we're going to go through the Altium to PADS Professional migration. I'm going to just do a few minutes here on the PowerPoint to give you an overview about what we're going to go over today, and so you can get an idea of what's going to be going on. And then I'll do a live demo where we'll take a full design from Altium into PADS Professional. So here are the steps that you're going to want to go through during the migration process. I'll refer to the slide quite a bit today so we know what step of the translation we're in. The very first step is you're going to want to have your designs synchronized in Altium. So you want your schematic and layout all synchronized in Altium before you attempt to pull it over to PADS Professional. You can still import it into PADS Professional if it's not synchronized, but it's going to cause a lot of headaches down the road where we're not sure if the schematic wins or the layout, if there's some discrepancies between those. So it's always best to synchronize them inside of Altium before you attempt to bring it over to PADS Professional. Okay, once everything is set up on your Altium side and you're ready to pull it into PADS Professional, what we're going to do is create a design-specific central library. And today I'm going to create a library that will just hold our symbols, cells, and parts from our design. There is another way if you already have a corporate library with all of your library data and you want to pull in your Altium data into that. There is a way to do that as well. I will not be showing that today, but I'll point out exactly where that happens during the translation process. Okay, another important step is defining your mounting holes. In Altium, mounting holes are treated exactly the same as pins. So if we didn't do anything about that, when PADS Professional sees that, it would just see it as a pin, and then there would be a pin number mismatch between the symbol and the cell because that mounting hole had just came in as a pin rather than a mounting hole. So we have to point out where those are in our translator so that it knows how to treat those, and then it can pull them in correctly. Okay. Once all that setup is done, we'll start the translation of the data. So we're first going to translate the cells and TAD stacks through the layout. So we'll pull all of those into our central library, verify that those are there, verify that those look good, and then we'll move on forward to the schematic, symbols, and parts. That'll be the next part that we pull into PADS Professional. And the last data piece that we'll pull in is the layout. So we'll pull in our layout from Altium, sync that up with the schematic, make sure that all of the data there is correct. And the last and the most important step of any translation is we want to package and forward annotate. So we can pull in our layout data and we can pull in our schematic data, and that's really good to have in PADS Professional, but if it's not packaging and not forward annotating correctly, it's not 100% useful information. So we want to make sure that our data is correct and we have all of the right information in our schematic and layout tool. So this is a very important step, the packaging and forward annotation. Okay, here's a list of our supported Altium file types. I won't go too in depth on exactly what we support. For the most part, we support quite a bit of Altium files, and as new Altium formats are being put out there, we're adding more and more to our translator to be able to pull that in for people wanting to move to PADS Professional. And this information is in the help documents as well, both on Support Center as well as in the installed documents. Okay, prerequisites. Of course, you're going to need the PADS Professional software, and you're going to need that software to be licensed. So if you do not have that currently, reach out to your account manager, reach out to me, and we'll get you set up with that. And you're going to need the Altium design files, everything that you want to pull over from Altium, so your PRJ, PCB, schematic docs, PCB docs. And I should mention too, with the Pads Professional software, you do have to install the translators. There is an option to do that when you are installing, and those are checked by default. So just make sure that you do have those installed when you install Pads Professional. And again, you want your Altium designs to be synchronized. This isn't 100% a prerequisite. However, it makes it much easier down the road if your designs are synchronized before you attempt to pull them in. And the mounting holes as well. If you have a list of those, that helps as well. If you don't know, there's a couple ways we can treat that. We can fix it in Pads Professional. It does take a little bit longer down the road. Or what I've also seen people do is they import a design to Pads Professional, and then they can populate a list of their mounting holes and then delete and go restart the translation knowing where those mounting holes are. Okay, and I do bring up mounting holes quite a bit just because this is a point where Altium treats data differently than Pads Professional does. So again, in Altium, mounting holes are defined as pins, and in Pads Professional, we have a special designation for that. So I'll show this in the demonstration as well today, where we're going to point out where our mounting holes are and how the translator treats those. And at the bottom, you'll see an error code that would pop up if for some reason you weren't able to configure those mounting holes correctly during the translation. Okay, let's get started with the demo. I'm going to have this migration flow and reference this occasionally so we can see where we are in our translation process. So first off, I'm going to assume that the design is synchronized in Altium already and that the data that I have is already synchronized. So we'll move on to the next step, creating a design-specific central library. So we'll do this with Pads Pro Designer. And again, this is just launching Pads Professional Designer. I have some hotkeys down on the bottom of my Windows toolbar just because I'm in the tool quite a bit every day, and so it's nice to have these shortcuts down here. Okay, so in Pads Designer, we'll hit this, create a new project, and press this little button right here to create a new central library. So we're going to create a specific central library for all of the data that we're going to bring in, and save this wherever you want to, and I'll name this port switcher library. Okay, and now Pads Professional is creating the library, and we'll create a project file. So the design I'm going to bring in is port switcher. Okay, so we have a blank schematic here, and it is associated to a brand new central library. Let's just make sure that that was all set up correctly by opening Pads Library Tools. It's going to let us know that we have a new property definition file just because it's a new library. That's okay. And we can see that we have all of our default partitions. Most of these will likely be empty. We'll probably have some borders in here, just some default borders anytime you create a new central library. But for the most part, all of these are empty. So that's okay. And that looks good. Okay. So where are we? Okay, so we've now created a design-specific central library. So that's set up. Now we're going to go ahead and define our mounting holes. So this is defined in a couple configuration files that are in the Pads Professional install. In this location here, this location is pointed to in the help file, so you don't have to memorize this to find out where this is. And there's two files in here that we're going to edit. So one of these files is this alt2pads.ini file. I'll open that up. There's quite a bit of information in here. This is used for all of our translators. If you're pulling over from OrCAD or CADStar, it's going to reference this file. And we're going to navigate to this section here. So ProTel mounting holes. Pin number prefix, you're going to want to set a prefix for your mounting holes for the pins on that, as well as you're going to want to define all of your footprints and pins of those mounting holes. So for example, here I have one entry already where it looks like the footprint is called PSC 1.5 by 5. So that's the name of the footprint. And this cell here has two mounting holes, M1 and M2. And what I suggest too is as you're translating multiple designs, you can just keep adding to this file so that if a design later down the road has the same cell with those same mounting holes, obviously, then the translator would already know what to do with it. And so you can leave this in here. If your design doesn't have this cell, then it's just going to ignore it. So that's where you set up your mounting holes. And another file as well that you're going to want to make sure is this PPCB to HKP. And in this one, you're going to want to make sure that the pin number prefix is the same as was in the previous file. So just make sure that that is set up correctly. And by default, these are shipped with the prefix being at MH for mounting hole. So you can just leave that as is. That's typically what I do. Okay. And so the reason that there are two files here that you have to edit is previously, several releases ago, I'm not sure exactly which one, but to translate from Altium to Pads Pro, we had to do it in two steps. We had to go from Altium to Pads and then Pads to Pads Professional. And what we've done now is we've streamlined that process so it's all one translator, but on the back end, it is doing two translations. However, for our use and what we see while we're doing the translation, it'll look very seamless just doing it all at once for us. Okay. So now we have our mounting holes defined. We're going to go ahead and translate the cells and the pad stacks. So what I'm going to do is open up our translator, our layout translator. If you are in VX 2.4 or before, there should be an option here for translators, and then I believe it'll say Altium to Pads Pro translator, and you can launch it from here. In VX 2.5, we cleaned up the start menu just because there were quite a bit of tools in here that were very seldom used, and we wanted to make it easier for our users to use the tools they're using most often, such as layout, schematic designer, or your design archive, your library tools. These are all in here by default, but all of the translators that kind of cluttered up this menu have been removed. And there's a cheat sheet in here for how to launch those. So if we click on this, it will show us exactly what commands to do and how to launch any of our translators or our seldom used tools. So what we're going to do is use the Altium to Pads Pro translator. And so we just need to run alt2pe.exe. And again, this was a change in 2.5 to our start menu. Okay. So alt2pe.exe. And this launches the Altium to Pads Professional translator. And if you're in 2.4 or earlier, it's the same translator, it's just launched a little bit different way. So first off, we'll navigate to our Altium project file. Port switcher and navigate to the PCB doc, that's our layout data. And Pads Professional project file. So this is the project that I just created in Pads Designer that points to our new central library that is design specific. There's the project file. Okay, so now we have our layout to bring in as well as we have the project that points to the central library. We're going to want to translate our layout design. So this will make sure that all the cells and pad stacks come over. And we're going to want to update the central library. We want all that information in our central library so that it can be used for other designs as well as package and forward annotate successfully. So that and hit translate. And then this will pop up and it'll take just a minute or so depending on the size of your design. Translation succeeded, so this is good. If there were any errors, our log file would pop up right here and we want to make sure we remedy any of those errors before proceeding. However, since there were no errors, that file did not pop up. If we did want to look at it and check out those warnings or notes to see what the translator did, we can go ahead and here to our project folder that we were translating to. In the PCB directory log files, we have this new file that was just created moments ago, and this goes through everything that the translator did, in case you're curious. Okay, so now we have translated the cells and pad stacks. Let's just go ahead and verify that those are here. Here's our central library. We'll refresh this, and let's check out our cells. We have a new partition now called board 1, and we have all these new cells in here. And for the most part, these look good. It looks like everything came over correctly, but we'll verify that later when we have our data in layout. Okay, so this looks looking good so far. All right, we'll proceed to the next step. We'll translate our schematics, symbols, and parts. So what I'm going to do now is going to look a little counterintuitive, but I'll explain why in a moment. So we're going to close out of this project. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to delete that project that I just created. The reason why is because, first off, all we've wanted to do to bring in so far is just the cells and tab stacks. So those are in our library, but we also brought in our layout. And what I've found is that it's a lot easier to bring in the layout later. So what I'm going to do now is just delete our layout, and so we can start a new project and then bring in our layout later, because we have our cells and our path stacks in our library, and that was the important part of this first step. So I'm going to go to port switcher. This is the project that I had just created, and we'll just delete that. Okay, and now I have that layout data deleted, so I can bring in a schematic into a brand new project. And so we'll do that here. Let me navigate to our new central library that has our layout data in it, port switcher lib. And we'll name it the same thing, port switcher. Okay, so now we have a brand new schematic, a project file, and I'm going to import our Altium, both our schematic as well as our symbols. So file, import Altium, there it is. And on this screen, what we can do is we can import our schematic, or we can import libraries. If you have a bunch of Altium libraries that you want to pull in all at once, you can do that from this tab. But today we're going to just do the schematic, and this will pull in all of the symbols from the schematic and add that to our central library as well. And we'll navigate to our Altium schematic, the port switcher. And you can select either your schematic doc or your PRJ PCB files. If you do have the PRJ PCB, I would recommend selecting that for import. The way it works is that the schematic docs are all sort of sheets underneath the PRJ PCB. So the fact that I have this PRJ PCB, it points to all of these other files. So the translator will import everything all together at once. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And on here, of course, we're going to want to translate our attributes. We're going to want to create a design library. This will help make sure that all of our symbols are imported correctly. Translate symbols only, that would be if for some reason we just wanted to extract the symbols and didn't want the schematic. We want to make sure we have the schematic this time, so I'll leave that unchecked. And let me go over to the settings tab and explain some of this over here. So this is all of the property mapping from Altium into Path Professional. So in Altium, for example, we have PCB footprint, but in Path Professional, we need that property to be cell name. So we're going to map these like so. The Path Professional install comes with a configuration file shipped in the install directory. If you do want to create your own configuration file, you can do so as well, so that you can share that within your company as you find specific settings that work well for your designs and what works best for you guys. So you can do that, and I'll show that in a minute here as well. So you're going to want to make sure that all of this looks good. If you're not really sure, you can use the default one and see how that comes in. And conversion. Okay, so here's some interesting things to note in this conversion section. So one thing I do want to point out that's very important is use translated central library. So as I mentioned, this demo today, we're importing everything into a design-specific central library. So this design here, this port switcher, I made a specific central library for all of our port switcher schematic symbols, as well as our cells and footprints. So it's all in a specific central library. If for some reason you already have a corporate library with PADS professional data in it and you want to import everything into your existing central library, you're going to use this field here and point to that existing central library. That way all of the information and data will be put in your existing central library, and then you're going to have to retarget your design later to point to where all that data is. But for now, we're just going to use the design specific, and if we wanted to change that later and migrate the information over, we could do that. Okay. Create harness connections. I keep this checked. I typically recommend people to keep this one checked. This helps with hierarchical designs, which I'll show you as this design comes in. Helps keep everything intact and correct, as well as collect instance cells. This is another good one to keep checked as well, making sure that all of your package type and PCB footprint data on your symbol instances comes over correctly. And if you do have questions about any of these, you can click on them and you see a description below of what that specific setting does, or you can click this help button here and it will open up the help documentation to that specific area so that you can read more in depth. Okay, so as I said earlier, you can set up a configuration file for your company once you refine these settings to what works best for you guys. I have done that already, so I'm going to navigate to one that I found works really well for me. CNV file, and these are just text files too, so if you do need to edit them later outside of the tool, you can edit them in any text editor or view it just to see what's in it as well. Okay. So we have our port switcher schematic that is ready to translate, so I'll go ahead and hit translate, and this will come on over into PADS Designer. And again, if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box and I'll answer them as I see them. Okay, translation results. So there are no errors on here, which is good. If there were errors, we would need to remedy those before moving forward. But this is our translation results that just tells us what the translator did. So it created a new partition for all of our symbols in the central library, as well as some warnings that we may want to take a look at just to make sure that everything's okay. So it looks like some graphics didn't translate over. That's okay. Just some images, as well as renaming duplicate pins. So it looks like some ground symbols, ground pins were renamed. That's okay. And part number changed. Okay, we might want to take a look at that later as well, just to make sure that that's okay and that's referenced correctly throughout our design. And if you do need to revisit this again, here is the location where this is located, just in your project file, folder directory, and oh, excuse me, sorry, this is actually the file that came in, the schematic file that came in, but this is saved as well in your log files right here in your project. You can always reference that later if you need to. So we'll hit close here, and it's going to load everything into PADS Designer. Okay, everything is looking good for the most part. We have some hierarchical blocks. Let's push into these and see how everything came in. Nothing blatantly obviously wrong with this. Everything seems connected at first glance, so everything is looking good so far. Looks like everything seemed to translate correctly. We have all of our blocks here that you can see in the navigator that came over. One thing to note is we do have this one called schematic 1. This is the default schematic that was created when I created a new empty project. I can just go ahead and delete this block because there was no data on it. You may need to save it if for some reason you had data in your design already prior to doing the translation, but since I created a new project immediately, I can just delete this because it is empty. Okay. And let's go take a look at our central library again, just to make sure that all of our schematic symbols came into our central library and that those are linked up through parts. So in our symbols let's check out, we have this new partition here, port switcher, and all of those symbols are located here as well. And if we go to our parts, we should see the new partition as well, and we can just make sure that our parts have symbols and cells associated with them. So that is looking good so far. Okay. So back to our migration flow. So now we have translated our schematic, symbols, and parts. Those are all, our schematic is, the data has been translated, and then our symbols and parts are all located in the central library, and it all looks correct so far. So now let's go ahead and move on to translating the layout. So again, I'm going to launch the command, which again is from the administrative tools MGC DSD command, or if you're in an earlier release, there will be a translator tab here where you can select the Altium Designer Professional Translator, and we'll go ahead and run the layout translator again. So again, the first time we ran this, we really only were interested in bringing in our cells and pad stacks. This time we already have our cells and pad stacks in our central library, and so we're really interested in bringing in our layout data. So we'll go ahead and select our Altium project file, the port switcher, and our past professional project file. So this is our project that has our schematic already in it that I was just working on right there. You'll notice there's another project file in here, this backup. That backup file is created anytime you run the schematic translator. It backs up anything that was already in that project. Since it was an empty project that I had just created, there's really no data in this backup file because I hadn't created anything yet and I started a new project. So this one could actually be deleted if you want to, but port switcher is the one that I have open right now. Okay, so we're going to want to translate the design. We can uncheck this update central library just because we have already pulled in the cells and pad stacks, and those are already in our central library, so it's unnecessary for us to update it. Go ahead and translate that. Okay, and translator succeeded. That's good. Okay, now we can close out of our translator, close out of this window, and let's take a look at that translation and see how it looks. So tools, pads, professional layout. We'll launch our layout tool. And you're going to see a pop-up box. Back annotation is disabled. That's okay because it's a new project, and we'll get forward annotation first. This pop-up is going to say that we need forward annotation to be performed. I'm going to push no right now, but we'll do it in a minute just because I want to do packaging and forward annotation separately for this demo. Okay, so here's our design. For the most part, it's looking good. It looks like everything came over successfully, no hanging traces or anything too obviously wrong. Of course, we could always check with some documentation. If you have a PDF documentation of the design from when it was in Altium, you could verify that here. But for the most part, it looks good, so we'll proceed. Okay, so the layout has now been translated. So we have our schematic, we have our layout, we have our library with all of our data in it, and now we want to verify that. We want to make sure that everything is correct and that everything can go forward to production. So we're going to package it and then forward annotate. So in Pads Designer, we're going to go to Tools, Package. And a couple things to note on our packager dialog box is I'm going to delete the local data and rebuild all local library data. So since we imported everything to our central library and we know that everything is in our central library right now, what this is going to do is this is going to re-query everything from the central library into the schematics sheet to make sure that everything is correct. So I like to do that just to make sure that everything is coming from the central library and there's no artifacts on the design that might be messing it up, as well as allow alpha-only reference designators. I'll keep that checked. And we're going to repackage all symbols. So there may be reference designators that came over from Altium, and it was already packaged, but I'm going to repackage it in Paths Designer so that everything can be clean and new. Okay, and it looks like it packaged successfully. Yeah, packager finished successfully. There's no errors in here. If there were errors, we would need to remedy those and fix it, but there's no errors, so we can go ahead and move on to forward annotation. Setup, so Paths Professional Layout, now we'll go to Setup Project Integration. And our goal here, since this just came in and we haven't synchronized any data, all of these lights are blocked out. Our goal here is to get all 4 of these lights to turn green. When they're all 4 green, that means that our schematic and our layout are all synchronized with our central database, the ICDB, and then we can move forward and we know that everything is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and click this amber icon for forward annotation. Okay, and it looks like it's still amber and we have some errors. So let's go ahead and check those out. Forward annotation text file. Let's open up the file viewer and check out this file. All right, so any errors need to be remedied before the forward annotation will complete successfully. So if I go down here, let's see where the errors are. Okay, so we have one error and it's right here. So we have a cell that has 4 pins while the part that references it says it should only have 3 pins. Okay, so there's some sort of mismatch there. It could be mounting holes. It could be how the symbols and cells were set up in Altium. So let's go ahead and take a look at this in the central library and see what needs to be done. So again, I can launch the library from Paths Professional, set up libraries, Paths Library Manager. And typically, anytime I do a translation, there's almost always some sort of error that comes up. So there's always something that you have to do that maybe didn't come in right because you didn't have the settings set up correctly, or maybe there was a sloppy designer previously who did something of a workaround to get the design working in Altium. And so there's typically something that has to be remedied. And so we'll go ahead and take a look at that and fix it. Okay, so cells, here's the cell that was referenced by the error. Looks like there are 4 pins on this, and let's look at the parts partition. The part that this was referencing was this LM1048, and as you can see, there's no associated cell with that. All these other ones that would forward annotate correctly have associated symbols and cells. This part only has a symbol, so that's something of note. Okay, and let's check out the pin mapping. All right, so first off, I always like to look at the symbol and cell preview to see what I'm working with on this part. And as you can see here, our symbol looks like we have 3 pins here, and then on the cell, there's 4 pins. So that can cause problems because not everything will be mapped out correctly. So what you're going to need to do with this is you're probably going to need to talk to the designer that created this originally, see what their design intent was. You can look up the data sheet as well to see how this part works correctly and see what all of these pins do specifically. I've already looked at this data sheet previously, and this pin 4 is actually an additional output on this device. So there's a couple ways we could remedy this. We could go ahead and change this symbol and add another port if we wanted to use that in our design at all. The fact that this already was working in Altium with 3 pins lets me know that the designer probably did not use this pin 4. They probably just disregarded it, didn't connect it. So I'm going to just create this pin 4 as a no connect pin. Of course, I would want to verify this with whoever created this design originally, just to make sure that that is the correct design intent. Okay, so this cell here is not linked correctly because of that pin number mismatch. So we'll go ahead and link it correctly. This is a 4-pin cell, TO263. We'll hit OK. And now it's going to let us know that, hey, this could cause a problem because the pin is a the part is a 3-pin device, but this cell as a 4-pin, so there's going to be a mismatch. We'll just hit OK. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign the physical pins to the logical pins. And I know how these are linked up. You can get that from the data sheet or from the device previously. And we have this pin 4 that's left over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create this as a no connect pin, like so. And we can hit OK and save that. Okay, now this looks correct. And let's refresh this library and see if that linked correctly. So our LM1048. Okay, now we have our associated symbol and cell. So this part looks to be correct because it has a symbol and a cell associated with it. All right, and that was the only error that we did have during our forward annotation. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out this message window and try our forward annotation again. Close out of our library tools. Set up project integration. And another thing to note here actually that I typically do is I usually uncheck remove hangers and remove floating traces and vias, just because if there are any hangers or floating traces on our design and that was a design intent to leave them there, then I'd like to leave them just in case. So we'll uncheck those and we'll hit this amber light to do forward annotation. And it's taking a little bit longer, which looks like it's updating everything from the central library. And forward annotation completed successfully with warnings. Okay, so this looks good so far. So we have our green light here, and now we need to back annotate. I believe we need to do back annotation because when I did the packager in Pads Designer, I repackaged everything, so some things might have gotten different reference designators. So we'll go ahead and back annotate to make sure that everything is correct. And now we have all these green lights here. We can close out of this. And we have our schematic that is translated over correctly, as well as the layout data. So everything here is pulled over from Altium. We have our schematic, we have our layout, our central library is updated as well with all of our symbols and footprints. Take a look at this. The layout's translated, package occurred successfully, as well as forward annotation. Okay, we can now move on to questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to punch those into the chat box. Looks like we have one that did show up a little bit ago. Is this translation the same for bringing it to Pad Standard Plus? Pad Standard Plus is different. So what I did today was Altium to Pad Professional. If you are using Pad Standard or Pad Standard Plus, you're going to be using a little bit different of translators to pull it over. It's a very similar process where we have some translators and we put that information in there, but it is different translators and different executables that will be run. What I recommend for that is we actually have some really good documentation in the Pad documentation on the install. And so I would recommend you looking at that for pulling in your design from Altium to Pads. And if you do have questions further on that, feel free to reach out to me and we can help you further. Okay, any additional questions? Okay, I'm going to leave my contact information up here as well. So if you do have any questions about the webinar today, or if you are curious about some more information on Pads Professional or any of the Metrographic solutions, feel free to reach out to me. If you forget my contact information, feel free to reach out to Kyle Lake with Oasis or your account manager directly, and we'll get in touch and help you out further. So thank you all for joining today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.